All right, and then we're going to do a share. Now what's going to happen? I should be seeing everything. All I'm seeing is Gene. I don't know why that is. Can everybody see the screen that has a basic outline there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Down in the right-hand corner, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's Gene.
This is not working the way I was told it would work, but it is working the way it works. I'm going to stop share for a second just to see if somebody else is trying to come in, because I can't see that. Hello, hello, hello. Grab seats anywhere you want to. And hopefully I will see Rosanna trying to get in, but if I don't, she'll yell at me.
Mhm.
All right. You will see something different there, which is that I have included an outline. That was, I think Celeste had made some questions about what we were doing. And I thought this was an easier way to kind of organize it. And so I could keep track of where I wanted to get to, and you could see where you wanted to get to. Our topic tonight is Zionism. And I can start with a brief, very, very, very generic definition, but then I want to add a kind of preamble to it. Zionism, at its simplest, is a plan for a Jewish homeland, because the Jews living in Europe, and anti-Semitism is primarily a European problem at this stage of the world. They felt that they would always be a minority in a hostile environment, and that the only way that they could control their future and control their lives was if they had a country in which it was their homeland and they were a majority there, not subject to. Okay, my caveat tonight, our topic is Zionism. Zionism is a trigger word for a lot of people. We are not here tonight, or even for these next 2 years, to try and resolve all the problems involved in the Arab-Israeli conflict. The reason that we are doing this at all is that I was in the midst of doing a project about the history of my lifetime, and I'm just I just want to see something here. I'm going to stop sharing for a second because I want to see if I'm doing something wrong. See, I get you there.
Mhm.
I get everybody. All right. Everybody has seen that. So I'm going to leave it at this screen for a while, and then I will, when I need to, reshare that outline. Okay. We're not going to resolve that, and it hasn't. Those problems and issues have not been resolved over the more than a century in the Middle East, and for a millennia in Europe. What I did was, though, I was responding to current events. And by current events, I don't even mean what's happening in Gaza. What I mean is the nature of conversations around what is happening in Gaza, that there is vitriol and violence and anger, etc. And what I wanted was the things that are happening merit angry, strong, even vitriolic reactions. But I want to say, can I understand better what's going on there? And the one way to do that for me was to start in the beginning, go back before there was a Jewish homeland, before Zionism was a reality, and say, what is the history going on in the Middle East? And does it help me understand anything about what is going on there? I am going to reshare that, because in doing what I am doing, what I want to do is to understand Zionism better than I understand it. And if you look up there, numbers 3 and 4, Roman numerals 3 and 4, I'm an English teacher by profession. And for an English teacher, what I need to have a thesis, something coherent that says, this is the point I'm trying to get across. And I have 3 points that I think that I want to have come across. And here comes Rosanna. I have 3 points that I want to have come across most strongly and clearly. And the first one is that Zionism is a product of 19th century European thinking. It is not something that happened out of the blue, and it is not something that could have come in another time and place. It is, and among its European fathers, I listed 5 of them up there. The Zionism is a product of Enlightenment thinking. It is a product of the French Revolution. The 19th century was in Europe was a century of wars of unification, wars of nationalism. You know, we tend to think, oh, Italy, Germany, those countries have existed forever. No, they were created in the 19th century. And, you know, before that, they were a series of principalities and other political divisions, not unified into countries. And the process of the 19th century was the process of creating nations in Europe. And the world that we know today is the world that that nationalistic movement created. Well, Zionism is a nationalistic movement too. It is imitative of what was going on in Europe. It is also heavily influenced by European colonialism. If you want to create a homeland in a distant territory already populated, the model for doing that is European colonialism. So Zionism is, and a lot of people argue against this, but I'm starting from the premise that Zionism is in part a colonial action. And the primary thing is that it is a counter response to European anti-Semitism, which in the late 19th century was becoming much, much more virulent. I also want to make a distinction. Western Europe and Eastern Europe are different. About 80% of all Jews in Europe live in Eastern Europe. That is where the most virulent anti-Semitic pogroms were happening. And when we get to the people who are going to run out of Europe and go to Palestine, there again in a percentage like 80% of them are going to come from Eastern Europe, from Russia, from Bulgaria, from Poland. These will be the places where the first waves of Jewish immigrants will come from. Okay, my first theme, I'm going to repeat it because I'm an English teacher, a high school teacher, and that's what I do. I repeat things. Oh, by the way, anybody who wants to interrupt at any time, feel free to. The first theme is Zionism was a natural product of 19th century European thought. That it was imitative of all the thinking that was going on in all of Europe, Western and mostly Western Europe, but also in Eastern Europe. The second theme is caught in number 4 there. I don't know if you can see my little cursor there. Stages of history and development of Zionism. Whatever revolution somebody wants to create, a Zionist revolution, a Marxist revolution, a capitalist revolution, a socialist revolution. The words that the political philosophers write on paper are words on paper. Those words meet the reality of real historical events. And Marxism, as Karl Marx wrote it, is not Marxism as it is practiced in the real world. Socialism is not practiced as written in the books on the socialist philosophy. The same thing for Zionism. Zionism will be changed by historical events. And I listed 5 key ones there. Theodor Herzl will be key. He's known as the father of Zionism. And Gary, I may be mispronouncing it. Aliyahs. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. 4 aliyahs, waves of Jewish immigration into Palestine. Then we're going to get the impact of world history coming in here. World War I, the interwar years and the British Mandate, and the impact of World War II and the Holocaust. They will all have a tremendous impact on how Zionism is practiced and realized in the real world. Okay, I'm going to stop that sharing now because we've hit that, and I like to see your faces. There we go. You're all there again. Again, English teacher, repeat. The first 2 theses that I want you to think about is that Zionism is not some out of the blue creation. It's a product of European thinking, and it fits the mold almost perfectly. 2, Zionism will not be what Theodor Herzl wrote about in his book, The Jewish State. Zionism will be altered and affected by history, just as Marxist revolutions have changed what Karl Marx wrote. It just is the nature. Words on paper are not just boots on the ground. Boots on the ground encounter the world in a different way. All right. The third.
Mike, hold on. Time out. You said something I've got to, and
Yeah,
I think I'm going to need you to explain it. Um, by my definition, Zionism is exactly what Herzl called for, which is two words: Jewish homeland.
yes.
That's all it was ever supposed to be.
But you're objecting to the term colonialism, I'm assuming.
No. We talked about this the other night. What I mean is, you went ahead and said that it. You didn't use the word morphed. That's my word, but you said that it changed dramatically because of the events of World War II.
And
And
World
I
War One, and just the reality of Jewish immigration in, because there's interactions between Arabs and Jews, and that's going to change things. I'm saying that the purpose, the ultimate goal didn't change. The goal was Jewish homeland, but how it will happen, and how it operates will change. And that, I mean, just like if Karl Marx were to uh, appear in the Soviet Union during the heydays of the Soviet Union, he might not recognize he may see some principles still in place that were his own Marxist principles, but that world that he imagined doesn't necessarily match up 100% with the world that exists. And I think that's true of every revolution. You start with a set of principles. In the United States, which Thomas Jefferson said, all men are created equal. Okay,
right.
are they, or is there, or do we run into problems and questions that alter it? We have slavery here, and all of a sudden, all men are created equal, but we're going to create a separate category for this group. I'm just saying, the world and events change political philosophy, change abstract plans. And again, if you were to read Herzl's book, it is not, it is the Jewish state that he imagined is not the same as what Israel was to become. And that's reasonable, because how could he foresee how history and events would change things? I think that's one of my minor points. The minor point being that an abstract notion, once it hits reality, there's a collision, and the collision will cause change. Does the purpose change? A Jewish homeland? No. All right. Again, and you're certainly welcome to reject the thesis, but the two that I've given so far are: one, it's a product of European thinking, and two, of 19th century European thinking, and two, that it is altered by facts on the ground, by realities that you encounter. I mean, for instance, in the second Aliyah, that's the generation of Ben Gurion that's going to come in, David Ben Gurion that's going to come in, and they will come in with a socialist model. Okay, that's changing what kind of home, it's redefining or filling out, however you want to look at it, what a Jewish homeland will look like. Is the goal still Jewish homeland? Yes, but it's not. I'm sorry. I thought someone was. Now, at this point, I'm trying to be academic. Here, I'm going to go over all of those in great detail. Is somebody trying to say something? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're going to go into detail about all these things.
Enlightenment,
Okay.
about French Revolution, and all of these things. The next part is not academic; it's opinion, and making that very clear. It's not about Gaza. What it is about is there was a millennia of history of European anti-Semitism. the problem of anti-Semitism, what they used to call the Jewish question or the Jewish problem, was a problem of Europe. And for a millennia, it was a problem, and it was an unsolved problem. In not having resolved that problem, what we do in Zionism is we pick up the problem that is in Europe, and we transplant it to the Middle East, and then we see that since you have not resolved the problem yet, what you've done is drop a problem in another geographical terrain, and now all we've done is change the combatants. If prior to the establishment of a Jewish homeland, or even the history of them in the process of becoming a Jewish homeland, in Europe you had Russians versus Jews, Germans versus Jews, Austrians versus Jews, Christians versus Jews. Now it's Arabs versus Jews, Muslims versus Jews, Egyptians versus Jews, and what I am suggesting is it's one long story. It's not the story simply of the last 100 years where we look at it and say the problem is Arabs and Jews have not learned to live together. The problem is for centuries before that, Europeans and Jews did not learn to live together, and anti-Semitism developed. And as a matter of fact, if you go back to this early stage before there is the first Aliyah, there were Jews living in Palestine. There were Jews living in Turkey, what is modern day Turkey. And generally speaking, there was tolerance. I'm sorry. Yeah.
When you say generally speaking, there was tolerance.
Yes.
Why don't you address the Grand Mufti and the 1929 massacre in Hebron?
Because
and
you're going to a different era. I'm saying in the era prior to the first Aliyah, there was tolerance. Is there intolerance now? Oh my God, yes. Look at what's going on. What I'm saying is the problem that the turbulent problems that troubled Europe have simply been moved into the Middle East, and that my tendency is not to look at them as two separate stories. There was Western anti-Semitism, and now a separate story. There's a problem in the Middle East. I think it is one continuum of a story. When you get to 1929, you have decades of Arab and Israeli quarrels over a lot of things. You have the interference of the British and the French in that region, and the troubles that they brought there. That's a different era, and that it's obvious there are problems, and there's intolerance, and there's anger, and there's turbulence, and there's killings and whatnot. I mean, that is the history of the region. That history was going on in Europe first, and it has been transferred there. That really is the only point. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put that sheet back up so you all can see it.
Pero entonces, Juan, ¿y a dónde va a ir? ¿Dónde se va a quedar? No, se va a quedar con el niño.
Okay. What I want to do is to go through, in particular, those first five. Zionism has many fathers, and I want you to understand it. Zionism is not a Jewish idea. The specific element of create a Jewish homeland obviously is Jewish, but it is a product of the first thing is Enlightenment thought, and I'm going to lead to what I'm going to draw a conclusion that you may disagree with, and that is absolutely fine. But I'm going to start with, in real short shrift, I'm going to reduce Enlightenment thought to 3 words: rational, secular, and humanistic. Enlightenment thought.
Sí, sí. Bueno, ¿te acordás que estaban todos siempre construyendo?
Okay. Enlightenment thought is in fact in many ways, and I guess I prefer seeing people, so I'm going to get rid of this, stop share. Enlightenment thought in many respects is, well, it's rational, secular, that's a very key word, and humanistic. It is contrary to religion. It is, in fact, Enlightenment thought is anti-religion. Very, very much so. I mean, the great product of the Enlightenment is the encyclopedia. What is the encyclopedia? An attempt to encompass all of human knowledge and accomplishments in one set of volumes. And it is very purposefully set in contrast to the Bible, which is a work of faith.
Your
And
definition of the Enlightenment as the word as used in Europe is not that it was based in Christianity?
yeah, absolutely not. Let me give you almost what is almost it's a comic and not comic. One of the references in the French encyclopedia was Holy Communion. I think they just said communion. Under communion, there was no paragraph, nothing written except a cross reference. See cannibalism. The writers of the French encyclopedia were anti-clerical, were anti-religion, and they had good and their reasons for that. If you look at the history of Europe prior to the Enlightenment, it is a series of religious wars and persecutions. It is the 100 Years' War, which is 100 years. It's almost really is 100 years, and it's a religious war. The 30 Years' War, which is 30 years long and is a war of religion. And there are, if you went to the civil wars in England, Edward becomes king, Edward II. He's a Protestant and he's persecuting and killing Catholics. He is replaced by Mary, who is a Catholic. She reverses it, and she is a Catholic, and she is prosecuting and persecuting and killing Protestants. She is replaced by Elizabeth, who is a Protestant, and is reversing it again.
Sale rápido, creo, ¿no?
The sound system here is not good, unfortunately. I'm not having.
Someone has to mute whoever it is. I'm not sure whether.
It's Rosanna. She must be on the phone and she didn't mute her. Zoom.
Okay, that's what it is. Thank you. I didn't catch it. At any rate, and Thomas Jefferson, near his deathbed, was kind of asked to assess what he did that was important. And he said, the most important thing I did, and I am paraphrasing here, is
University of Virginia, reading the University of Virginia.
well, he also said, writing the statute separating church and
Oh, sí,
state,
sí, que nos enseñaron cuando.
because what he had written, what he knew of, and had present day knowledge in his day, was how much religion had led to all these internecine wars, into all these killings. I mean, half of the people who came to America came because they were trying to escape from religious persecution. And he did not want to see that pattern repeated here in America. So he said, separate church and state. Now, here's where you may disagree with me, Gary, and that's fine. I am going to suggest that Zionism is not a religious movement at all, that it is a secular movement, that religion is one of the connective tissues for Jews of the world, but it is not, in terms of Zionism, the primary. For me, the primary connective tissue for Jews who want to create a homeland in Palestine
No te queda
is
nada.
a long history of suffering and persecution and the diaspora, which had spread them out. All these realities of Jewish history are really what connect them. One of the key lines in Herzl's book is, "We are a people."
Oh, pero sí.
He didn't say we are a religion. He didn't say we are the chosen people of God. We are a people, and regardless of, you might be a Russian Jew or a Polish Jew or from wherever, a French Jew, whatever it might be. What ties you together to those people who live in a completely different culture than you, who speak a different language than you, are A, that shared history of suffering, and B, that mantra that has reverberated throughout much of Jewish history, next year in Jerusalem. That idea of
So
going back.
it's the statement about Zionism, the concept of a Jewish homeland was born out of a need for self-defense and preservation of life. I agree with you completely. That said, anyone who identified as Jewish in the 17th and 18th century were what today would be considered ultra-Orthodox. the concept of Reform Judaism was born in the 20th century, didn't exist back then. And so it was very much about religion.
Yeah, I think I will leave it that we are going to disagree on that. I am not saying that religion meant nothing to the Zionist Jews. I am saying that the motivation for the homeland was not about, oh, can we have a place to practice our religion? It is a place where can we survive? It is a place where will we not be murdered and persecuted? It was
Right.
it was
And they were
a
being murdered and persecuted because they were behaving like these strange non-Christian people.
well, yeah, but let me
You know what, I
Yeah.
don't know that much about him, so I was doing research and just watching up him. And one of the things that I found when I started running his name and raising questions, it stated that he sought a secular state with
Yes.
freedom from religion as well as freedom of religion.
Yes.
He famously wrote that rabbis would remain in their synagogues, just as the army will be kept to its barracks. Nevertheless, he valued cultural Judaism and respect for religious practice and public life. His status quo vision balanced tradition with modernity. And so I thought that what you were saying was really interesting, and it was bearing out what you were saying with the information that I was coming across, which might be different from you, because I'm just starting to
Mhm.
learn about him. But from what I had read was like, he also wanted Arabs to be treated well where he was
Very much
going.
so.
So he wanted that. So he was this person who was separating the difference between religion and so whatever I found was bearing out what you were saying.
And again, for you, Gary, I'm not talking about this is an atheistic state. That is not where I'm going at all.
Mm-mm.
It is that the movement for a homeland was was a political movement, was a secular movement, was a movement to find a place to escape from the pogroms that were happening,
Persecution,
from
yes.
the persecutions and the violence, and that, as a matter of fact, part of what I read, and I'm not as well versed in Jewish history as perhaps that you are, but is that a lot of the most orthodox of Jewish thinkers were opposed to Zionism,
And some
because-
still are.
and some still are, because they believed that the return to to Jerusalem, was something that God would bring about in the Messianic age when he would come through, and that therefore to jump the gun and say, we're going to go there before God is ready for us to go there, was an issue or a problem for them.
And that's if you've ever seen the movie The Source or
Yes.
read the book, that's very much the premise of the difference between the American ultra Orthodox and the rest of Judaism. It's the ultra Orthodox believed literally that until God split open the Mount of Olives and the Messiah came marching out, there
Yep.
need not be an Israel.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I don't think we're that far apart here on all of this, Gary. But I do believe that Zionism is a Enlightenment doctrine, Enlightenment operation, and that as such it is.
Let me ask you one Enlightenment question, because I've been sitting here Googling around looking at definitions of enlightenment, and it's largely supporting what you're saying. I've always thought of one of the primary forces of the Enlightenment to be Leonardo da Vinci. And when I think of Da Vinci's artwork, I think of nothing but Christianity. I think of the Sistine Chapel. I think of the Pieta, the David.
Well, they're getting into Michelangelo, I think.
Well, true. I'm sorry. I meant to say
Now, first
Michelangelo,
off,
not
no
Da Vinci.
movement is monolithic, but in its overarching terms, it was about the power of human reason and rational thought to create better models for politics, for whatever it might be. And that, again, they were living in a world torn apart by religion and wanting to say, we need to develop our models that let religion be a private matter, each welcome to practice their own faith the way they want to, but not as a matter of a public. Religion was not a director of public policy, because when it is, their view, again, looking at literally for about 300 years, there's almost no year that goes by that there's not some religious war going on. I mean, you can almost go from the Crusades on up, and it's just again and again and again and again, going to Thomas Jefferson saying, my greatest accomplishment was the separation of church and state. It's because that model brings bloodshed, brings hatred, brings, Gary, if I disagree with you over some idea, we can fight about it. If I disagree with you because I have a religious different with you, my faith tells me this is true and your faith is the faith of infidels. Well,
Right.
that is a gap we're not going to bridge, because I'm so damn sure I'm right and you're so damn sure you're right. How do we bridge that?
The very definition of the word faith is a belief in the absence of proof.
Yes.
And so, it's no, two people who have opposing faiths are never going to find common ground.
Susan, want to say something?
Well, that kind of religious conflict has never been the basis, I'm jumping ahead
Right,
here,
go ahead.
for the Arab-Israeli. It's not like, I mean, yes, there might be some that believe we're the true believers and you guys are the infidels, but for the most part, it's not what it's about. And so I agree with you.
I am about to say I agree with you, but you.
And another thing, well, at some point I want to tell you what my son said, who's he's brilliant. He's like a Renaissance man. When he told him I was going to discussion about Herzl, of course he had something to say. But okay, what am I up to now? I've lost my train of
With
thought.
your son had something.
No,
to say.
but I want to get to him later. Oh gee, I don't want to.
It'll come back and you can interrupt at any time. Okay, that was probably the hardest of these things to get through, because again, I have drawn a conclusion.
Bueno, para
Zionism is secular. And that is a very important distinction. In which case, then you have to decide, well, if religion is not the driving force and connective tissue, what is? And again, I think it's millennia of history. And I want to. I'm not going to dwell on anti-Semitism overly, but I want to use two examples. One was are you familiar with the Damascus Affair? The Damascus Affair was a revival of an old medieval trope about Jews.
Does that work?
It's that Jews kill Christians so that they can take in ritual murders,
It's not here.
take the blood and use it for other sacrifices or whatever.
Yes, take the blood of children.
Yeah, exactly, the blood libel. Yes, and in 1840, all of a sudden the blood libel got revived, and it came out, I think, out of France, but they were telling stories that in Damascus, the Jews are killing Christian children so that they can take the blood and use it for these ritual sacrifices that they're doing, and it started a wave of anti-Semitic violence, very, very much so, and because it's on such a vile, virulent level, that kind of a story. It's one thing to say, I don't like this group. It's another to say, they're killing innocent children so that they, oh my God, it's vile.
Were there Christians in Damascus at the time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And number two, the Mortara incident. And this isn't so much about violence, but about the things that separate Christian Europe and Jews in Europe. The Mortara incident was, there was a 14-year-old girl who was working as a servant in a Jewish household. And one of the children was very sick, and she did an emergency baptism. Now, baptisms can usually only be performed by priests, but in an emergency, anybody can do it. That's part of Catholic theology. Well, Pope Pius determined that once the child was baptized, the child was Catholic, and by church doctrine could not be raised in a Jewish home. So he sent the papal carabinieri, their military force, their police force, and they grabbed the child. And the child was raised in a Catholic home, never returned to his Jewish family, in fact, became a priest. But again, the anger and outrage you took this child from a Jewish home because somebody did a ceremony, and you said he's now Catholic and no longer Jewish. And again, it's that kind of outrage. You know, if there is an antidote to anti-Semitism, it is integration and assimilation. If we accomplish that, then we're not fighting at each other because we have come to accommodations with each other. Okay. One of the most assimilated Jews in Europe is Theodor Herzl. He's involved in German theater. He is a lover of German culture. In almost every way in his life, he connects more with Germanic culture, Germanic Christian culture, than he does with Jewish culture. But nonetheless, he is Jewish. And he is sent as a journalist to cover the Dreyfus trial. And he basically said, I guess it doesn't matter how well I fit in, how well I have accommodated myself to the culture of Austria and Germany. There will never be a place, unless we have a place of our own, we will always be a minority in a hostile environment. You know, I said earlier, the part that we were arguing about, that essentially one of the central impacts of Zionism was to transplant a problem that existed unresolved in Europe to Middle East, with one big difference. Once you establish a Jewish homeland, then you have a place where Jews are in a majority, and in a majority they can create an infrastructure and sets of institutional and political and governmental values that match their own beliefs and desires. And it also is the formation of a state gives you more power. And that will change the dynamics of the fight. If you are a Russian Jew, your power is just about zero. And you are subject to the whims of these waves of pogroms that are going to happen. And there's really little you have to say or can do about it except to flee. And this is, to me, interesting. And I don't want to make too much of it, but to me, it's interesting. In 1881, Alexander II was, the Tsar of Russia was assassinated. And what followed were probably the most horrific pogroms against Jews in Russia in all their vile, terrible history of that. As a result, 3 million Jews fled Russia. Where did they go? More than 2.5 million went to America. About 40,000 went to Palestine. The rest went to either Western Europe or Argentina. There was a rich philanthropist, Jewish philanthropist, who had the idea that they would create the Jewish homeland in Argentina. So he created a settlement and was funding it. And so a lot of people went there. I don't want to make too much of the numbers except to say that we cannot say as a definition, Zionist and Jew are the same thing. They are not. There is an overlap, and the overlap is different size at different stages of history. But what you will find is in all four aliyahs, 75 to 80% are going to go to America. America was the place that the Jewish refugees thought was the place where they could have the most beneficent conditions in which to live. Remember, I've told you this before, the Crane Commission.
The what commission?
The Crane, CRANE. The Crane Commission was, after World War I, I know I'm jumping the gun here, but it fits. After World War I, they had to make decisions. What are we going to do with the Middle East? How are we going to divide it up? A commission was sent just to ask the people there, to the Syrians, to the Jordanians. Well, I'm using modern names, but you know, to the various Arab groups. What would you want? And they all said, we want to be independent. But no, you're not going to get that. Given that, would you rather be under French rule or British rule? And they said, American rule. Because all they knew of Americans were That way, that's where a lot of people had fled and done well. And B, when the Armenians were going through their terrible crisis and starvation, the Americans, without creating an imperial action, just went in and helped and fed the poor.
And what years are we talking?
We're talking, they're in the years right around World War One, right before. You're gonna, one of these sessions that we're gonna do is gonna be on the Armenians and the genocide with the Turks. And the Americans provided aid. And so the view of America, and I point this out because I think it's one of those terrible ironies of the world. Prior to World War One, America was the place most admired by the world of the Middle East. Today, we're the infidel. We have reversed that completely. In 1914, 15, 17, 20, they would have said, "Oh God, we hate the British. Oh God, we hate the French," and they had good reason to hate the British and hate the French. And now, in many respects, they hate us. And so, whatever goodwill we may have had has been spent. But it is not surprising in the four aliyahs. Am I saying it right again?
The plural is actually
The-
aliyot, but aliyah, whatever.
Aliyah.
Yeah, it's Aliyah.
Aliyah. I will, unfortunately, I apologize in front, I will mispronounce a lot of things here. But not with any intent. That the majority of people who were escaping from persecution, from being murdered, were going to America, and it was always. And the other thing to point out is that we need to make a differentiation between Western Europe and Eastern Europe. More than 80% of all Jews, we lived in Eastern Europe. And the most virulent anti-Semitic actions were taking place in Russia, in Poland, in Bulgaria, rather than in France and other Western European countries. This is not to say that there was not anti-Semitic violence. There absolutely was. In France, the French Revolution comes into play here. After the French Revolution, with all of its ideals of liberté, égalité, fraternité, and their growing belief in principles of liberal democracy, they wrote and passed what is called a Declaration of Emancipation. And I make it akin to Thomas Jefferson writing, "All men are created equal." This said, Jews deserve to have full rights of citizenship and should be integrated into the country. I'm really paraphrasing here. And it was an ideal that had a lot of people who believed in it. And it spread to Italy and to Germany. Unfortunately, when things went wrong, and this is where Captain Dreyfus comes in, 1870 was the Franco-Prussian War. France was really considered the greatest military power in the European landmass. And they got their behinds kicked. And they not only lost, they lost quickly. They were routed. And they were shocked, ashamed, horrified. How could this happen? And we need a scapegoat. Well, if you need a scapegoat and you're living in Europe, the Jews are the most convenient scapegoat. And they identified Captain Alfred Dreyfus as the man who betrayed France. And they faked evidence and forged documents. Those forged documents were later proved to be forged, and he had to be released. But, Western Europe at least had some infrastructure to hope in the possibility that there could be some accommodation that would diminish, lessen the anti-Semitic feelings, and maybe actually lead someday to a more egalitarian society, accepting Jews as completely as any other citizen. Again, I make it akin to Thomas Jefferson's "all men are created equal." Yeah, except until maybe by process we get better and better and better, we hope. Eastern Europe did not have that infrastructure. There are no declarations.
We're talking about Dreyfus.
Yeah,
Like there really was a spot,
yes, absolutely.
but
It wasn't him.
it wasn't Dreyfus and.
Yeah, no. And they forged documents to prove it was Dreyfus. Yeah, absolutely.
And
Eastern
the
Europe.
scapegoat, I mean, because he was Jewish, did they try to pin it on him?
Oh, absolutely. They not
Because
only
of
tried
his-
to, they pinned it on him.
Okay,
They put him in jail.
all right.
Well, then just put him in jail, they sent him over to
But
Devil's
his
Island.
Jewishness, was that part of why he was targeted?
Absolutely, absolutely, no. And again, this is where Zola writes his famous J'accuse, his, I guess you call it an editorial, accusing the French government of anti-Semitism and of just rushing to judgment on this man when he was innocent. Okay. Eastern Europe doesn't have that same infrastructure, doesn't have those same history of liberal democratic principles and values. And
It's very tribal.
it's very much,
And I
yeah.
mean, Jews, if you lived in Moscow or wherever, any of those places, Poland, Hungary, the Russian Empire, you were not a Russian, you were a Jew. That was your identity. And that continued until the 20th century, when there was a lot of, there was this whole movement to save Soviet Jewry. We're talking the 1980s, and you were not a Russian, you were a Jew.
Jew,
You
absolutely.
lived in Russia, but that was your identity.
And one of the ironies is in the immediate aftermath of the Russian Revolution, Jews were treated better. It was a brief period. It was if they were saying, we're creating the ideal paradise, political paradise in which we welcome all these
Right.
people. It didn't last. And what followed were more waves of pogroms,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
worse than before. So it was, yeah.
And I just want to
Yeah.
I thought of what I
Go
wanted
ahead.
to say about this secular religious thing. I think what might confound some people is, among Jews, there are those that, though they might not outwardly say it, they're religious or secular, but there's a very fuzzy kind of separation, or awkward kind of separation, that for a lot of people, it's like religion means, what are you? Are you a Muslim? Are you a Jew? Are you a Christian? Are you a Hindu? And you don't often hear of somebody who's a secular Christian. Christian, if you're identifying as a Christian, it usually means basis in a belief, a very
Right.
strong belief. But in Judaism and among Jews, it's not necessarily the true. And a lot of Jews are completely secular and might not think of faith at all. And it's cultural, traditional, that type of thing. And I think that's why it confuses a lot of people who want to define certain conflicts as religious when it's not. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's true. It's like, as a Jew, I've been told, well, you believe this or you believe that, and it's like, I'm not sure what I believe. Why are you telling me? Because there is this, fuzzy kind of difference. And I think there might be some Muslims that live very secular lives, and other people that identify with a religious group, but among Jews, it's really complicated.
Right, and if we look at the state of Israel as it is today, it's not a theocracy.
No,
And if indeed Zionism was primarily a religious operation, a religious doctrine, then Israel would have probably been established as a theocracy.
and I
it would not.
totally agree that Herzl was definitely very secular.
Oh,
And his motivations were secular. And as far as the theocracy that Israel is not, the religious Jews are gaining more and more and more control and influence
And
over government.
evangelical Christians in America there is
very
a
similar.
there is a movement around the globe in those directions, and then
Yeah.
of course obviously you have Muslim theocracies in various countries too. It is a trend that again, having been through the history that Europe was through of all those hundreds of years of religious wars, that gives you more than trepidation.
Mhm.
Yeah, again. Okay.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Gary, what percentage of Israelis are Muslim? Like,
Um,
20 to, somewhere between 20 to 25%.
Yeah, you know what? I wanted to, Mike, can you do me a favor? Can you give me the ability to share something real quick?
Okay, it says allow there, so I guess I can. I didn't know I could.
Okay. I just want to show you guys something. Um, I don't know. Oh, here we go. Share. And let's get rid of this. And here. Can you guys see this picture?
No.
Yeah,
No.
now,
Oh, there we can.
yeah, it's a little
Yeah.
fuzzy for me, but
It's right here where
yes,
my,
yes.
all right. I don't know how big it's appearing to you guys. I don't know how to make this any bigger, but I've been to Israel 3 times. The first time I was 18 and I went in 1973 as a volunteer in the Yom Kippur War.
Mhm.
This is a picture of the Arab quarter in the Arab market in Jerusalem. And what you have here in the middle are shoppers, Israelis and Americans, all wearing their khakis. And what you have here in their double knit shirts and their very trendy bell-bottom pants and fine leather shoes are the Arab kids working the marketplace. And so the fact that there is a significant population of Muslims in Israel. In truth, they are Israeli citizens and they are perfectly happy and thrilled to be Israeli citizens. And most of these kids were absolutely horrified that there was a war going on because they just wanted to live.
and they have the right to vote.
Mhm.
Well,
Oh, yes,
we're talking about
absolutely.
Israeli Arabs. We're not talking about the occupied territory.
Right.
Right,
Correct.
right, absolutely.
But it's,
yeah.
to Israelis or those who are aware of what's going on, may I say, it's a demographic time bomb.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the argument about a one-state solution or a two-state solution. In the argument in Israel against the one-state solution is that if you're going to be one state and you're going to incorporate all of these Palestinians into the state of Israel as citizens, then you're going to, as you say, as a function of demographics, you're going to find that Jews quickly become the minority in that country.
And even if they're not annexed as one state,
Yeah, look,
with the current
what
border.
Netanyahu's doing is
Going
horrific. I'm not defending that. I mean that the far right stuff is I don't want a one state or a two-state solution. I just want to kill everybody. And not
What
going
I'm,
there.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull us away from this only because really what I'm trying to get us to do today is to understand how the world grew the way it grew. We are not going to, in the end of 2 years, we won't resolve the Arab-Israeli divisions, but maybe we'll understand them a little bit better. Okay, if the Enlightenment was a key, just one more thing about the Eastern Europe. Eastern Jews in Western Europe tended to be urban Jews. In Eastern Europe, they tended to be agricultural. And it is when David Ben Gurion comes in the second Aliyah, he says, we are not creating urban settlements. That is not our primary goal. Our primary goal is to create agricultural settlements, because if you work the land, then you gain the right to the land, and that we will work the land and work the land and work the land. And so it will be his generation that will set up the kibbutz system in Israel. And his generation will probably, I mean, I have to look more specifically, but really, I'm going to say almost till 1970, the generation of that second Aliyah ruled in the Israeli government. It was a very long stay. Now there is a lot of one party, then another party, then another party, but there was a long period of time where there was essentially that generation held power. And so it's a very important part of this history. The last one, oh no, nationalism I want to get to. Zionism at its base is a nationalist philosophy, doctrine. And nationalism probably dominated 19th century Europe thinking. This is the era in which nations were created. I said earlier, we think of, well, Italy's been around for how many millions of years? Well, no, Italy became Italy in the 19th century. Germany became Germany in the 19th century. There was this idea that there were these wars of unification, and they were wars. You don't want to join us. Well, you will join us. Naples, you will become a part of Italy. Genoa, you will become a part of Italy. And we will form this country. And why do we do it? What is it that ties us together? And it's not ethnicity. I truly don't believe that. Because if you study the history of the world prior to the modern era, the modern world, nations, the world is changed by waves of migration. There's one wave of migration, then there's another wave of migration, and each migrant group adds a change. Sometimes they just integrate themselves in, sometimes they come and dominate the area that they moved into. So, you know, the Nazi idea of the pure Aryan race is a fiction. Maybe if we can go back far enough in genetic history, we can find a pure Aryan, but they don't exist anymore because there have been waves and waves and waves of migrations, and we are, to use a very ugly term, we are mongrels. We are a mix of
But
everything.
it doesn't have to exist, does it? Because all you have to do is get people to believe.
Oh, and yes.
Doesn't have to exist.
Well, that's part of what nationalism is about.
Yeah.
Nationalism says, let's romanticize our history. Let's make us the good guys. Let's make us the knights in shining armor. Let's make us the pure of heart and all the other bad guys that we're dealing with and fighting. And that's part of what nation building, creating a nation is all about. But there's another aspect of what creating a nation is. You become stronger. If I unite Naples, Genoa, Rome, and whatever, yeah, we've got more people, we've got more power, we've got more resources. We stand together and we can maybe conquer some other areas or do whatever it is we choose to do. But and I think that is, if we're looking at the history of Zionism as it worked itself out in the state of Israel, is the big difference between a Russian Jew and an Israeli Jew is an Israeli Jew lives in a country where he has power, lives in a region where he has power, lives in a region where he can defend himself. Again, if you were a Russian Jew or a Bulgarian Jew, you really didn't have any defenses. Your only defense was to flee. Now that changes the dynamics, but that's dynamics. That's not, that is not about the real divisions between people. Okay, the last piece I want to put into this, and I'm trying to keep an eye on the clock here, is colonialism. And here, Barry, is where we may run into trouble, we may not run into trouble. Zionism is, to me, also a colonial operation. If by definition you say, I want to go to a foreign territory and establish a homeland where there's already a population there, then I have to either dominate that population or move them out. And that is the history of colonialism. If you think about, the Europeans of all stripes came to America, and the Indians got pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. Neil Ronk, who used to do the history forum with me, told me once, you can go across the map of the United States and you will find the name Delaware in about 15 different places, because the Delaware Indians were pushed west, and their name got put on a map, and then they were pushed again, and their name got put on a map and then they got pushed again. And that is how colonialism operates. And I want to say something here. When I say that Zionism is a product of 19th century European thought, whether it's Enlightenment or nationalism or colonialism, all of these isms were very respected in their day. If you were going to do this, then these are the models to follow. They work, and the winners in a war always get to write the history. So the British were telling us how great they were. The French, when they were Napoleonic, they were telling us how great they were. And that is the way that history works. And so Again, there has been revisionist history. People who will now look at the colonial period, and I raise my hand, I'm one of them, who says it's one of the most terrible periods, that the crimes committed in the name of empire are horrific. Whether you go to Angola, whether you go to Latin America, whether you go to our treatment of Native Americans here, whether you go to Indochina, which later became Vietnam, the stories are of colonial behavior. In most cases, colonial behavior is racist behavior, because they look at a people whom they are able to say are lesser than we are. One of the idealistic presidents in the United States is Thomas Jefferson. And he owned slaves. I'm putting that off to the side. He said about Native American, they have a right to be where they are. They have a right to be respected. And then he had to reverse himself with the Louisiana Purchase and say, but they're going to just feed themselves. They'll have all this territory, and they'll take a minimal amount out of it, just enough to feed themselves and just go on sustaining themselves. Whereas if we send Americans in there, we'll become the breadbasket of the world. We'll feed the world. Yes, he was right. But that, what he in essence was saying, we will be better stewards of the land, and we have the right to push them out. And again, I take a bleak view towards colonial history, but I could not tell this story as I honestly feel it is without including that part of the history in there. And again, there are people who will dispute that it is not colonial, and I will respect the differences. One of the things I'm going to say as a kind of caveat for the rest of the next 2 years, I will contradict myself many times, and the reason is, as I read,
You learn more.
I
that's what history
learn
is
more,
about.
and
History
I
doesn't stay the same.
change how I see things. So I may, in 6 months, we may be talking about this. I may give you a different answer. It's not because I forgot my original answer. It's because my new reading has made me see something different.
And things, I mean, people discover and
Yes.
people find more things. And so history doesn't stay the same. And anybody who believes that doesn't really
And
understand.
history being written by the winners hide the warts and tell you the good stuff. And
I think, Mike, your definition of colonialism, I would agree with. That said, the difference between how Israel was born may have been a colonialistic act, but it wasn't taken by the Jews who descended upon, and declared it to be their own territory. I mean, think of England in the 1800s, 1700s. Their colonial position was make the world England. That
yes.
was word for word their
yeah.
position on colonialism.
You are absolutely right. Israeli.
But what's the difference between saying make the world England and we're picking up this piece here and saying make this part England if someone's already there? What's the difference?
What I'm saying is, it's in the case of make the world England, it was being said by the English. Israel did not come to be as an act of Jews or Judaism or Zionism. It was the collective guilt of the world, in the United Nations after the Holocaust.
I mean, there's some truth in what you're saying, but Jews did not have the power. When England went in, they went in with a navy. Jews didn't have a navy. England went in with an army. Jews didn't have an army. They went in and said, our numbers will accrue and accrue and accrue and accrue. And eventually they got, when we get to the interwar years with the British Mandate, they get a lot of support from the British Army. You mentioned that the Hebron massacre, which was a terrible event. I think it was around 200 were killed, some number like that. Jews were killed by Arabs. Almost 200 Arabs were killed by the British in response to. So there is a military element to it. The Jews do not have a military back then. They don't have those resources to do that. So the process will be different, the intent is along the same lines.
In
Do you
fact,
accept that?
I was gonna.
that's an
say,
excellent
is
way
that
of saying
thought-
what I was trying to say. So we're in agreement.
All right,
I was gonna say that comparing the Jewish movement into Israel, it was just to create a country, whereas the European nations with their colonies, the idea was to exploit and get the raw materials
Yes.
and labor, whatever, from the
Absolutely.
colonies to get it back to the homeland to enrich the homeland. So it's not really the same thing here. The new going in
if,
is for a different purpose.
yes, this is slightly off topic, but it's one of the themes that I believe in. The most important revolution in the modern world was the Industrial Revolution. And it is the Industrial Revolution that fueled England's empire. And that's why they needed colonies, because we have these factories. We need to get natural resources, and we need to have a group to sell things to. And, you know, it's Industrial Revolution and capitalism are almost side by side as the two most impactful revolutions in terms of creating the modern world we live in. And with the Jewish colonial actions in the Middle East, in Palestine, they were not trying to create an industrial giant necessarily. As a matter of fact, they were agricultural for many generations. Okay, I want to move quickly to, and I will put this up here so you can see it for a moment. And then I want to take it down because I prefer being able to see you guys as opposed to being just able to see this sheet. We're going to look at what the stages of history that the Zionism went through before we get to this the foundation of Israel. I'm going to ignore Theodor Herzl because we've really already talked about him and we're going to run out of time. I want to talk about the waves of Jewish immigration. You'll notice I avoid mispronouncing the word. The impact of World War I, the interwar years and the British Mandate, and the impact of World War II and the Holocaust. Now, I am going to tell you up front, you will get very, very, very short shrift on all of these. The reason being is one of our months, we're going to do the impact of World War I. That's going to be a focus. One of our months, we're going to do the interwar years and the British Mandate, and we'll do 90 minutes on it. One of ours will be looking at World War II and the Holocaust and their impact. So these will be gone into in much greater detail as we move forward. For now, I'm going to just give you quick arcs of impact and action. You okay with that, or can I?
Oh, we're good.
I ask,
Yes, you are. You can.
what are the dates of the four,
It's after you.
what are the dates of the four
Ah,
waves of
I am
immigration?
going to give you those. Very good.
I wanted to say in the word too.
Yes. All right. I'm going to. I'll leave this up for a minute. To give you the dates. The first one was basically in response to the pogroms going on in Russia, the 1880s to 1900s. The second one is basically 1900 to World War I, 1914. The third one is the interwar years, taking us up to World War II. And then there's a fourth one after. I'm only going to focus on the first three. But I'm going to give you, I hate numbers, but I'm going to give you some numbers. Because I want you to understand. During World War I, England is going to speak with Chaim Weizmann, and out of that will come the Balfour Declaration, which is essentially a promise to help the Jews establish a homeland in Palestine. There will also be correspondence between Sharif Hussein and McMahon, and the McMahon-Hussein correspondence will promise that they will allow the Arabs to have immediately will allow the Arabs to immediately have a state, and the numbers are going to say it will not be a Jewish state just because the numbers are what they are. If we go to the first Aliyah, there were about 45,000, and I'm gonna get this because I like to see people. There were about 40 to 45,000 who came to Palestine. There were 700,000 Arabs. So if in 1917 we decide to have you guys are independent, form your own state, it's going to be an Arab state. That there just isn't. I mean, the numbers are. I mean, I didn't work out the percentages. That 80%, 90% Arab, whatever it is, it's a high percentage. Somebody else can do the math. And this is one of those problems, and part of colonial history. The British promised the Arabs they could have their own state, and they promised the Jews they could have their own state, and they broke the promise to both of them.
When was that?
This is
The Balfour Declaration?
Balfour Declaration for the Jews and the McMahon-Hussein correspondence for the Arabs. The reason is in World War I, for various reasons, because they're also dealing with the Ottoman Empire as part of the enemy force. They needed the support of Jews and they needed the support of Arabs, strategic importance to them. And therefore they made promises to both of them, contradictory promises. You can't keep both promises. You can keep one or you can keep the other. You can't keep them both. Okay, I'm gonna go further on that, but first I'm gonna go back to the numbers with the 4 aliyahs. In the second aliyah, it's important not for its numbers. It's the generation that will really create the modern state of Israel. It's the generation of David Ben-Gurion and a whole slew of the leaders who will become the prime ministers of Israel are of this generation. And they are going to shape the state of Israel. They are the ones they come with a socialist model. They will create the kibbutz system, and they will be the strong leaders of the fight to A, establish a Jewish state, and B, defend a Jewish state. Probably, I am not an Israeli, but I would suspect if an Israeli historian were here to say, he would say they are the most important generation in Israeli history. Whether that's an accurate statement or not, it strikes me that it probably is, but I can't back it further than saying that's my opinion.
And what are those years again?
But this is the second one is basically 1900 to 1914.
So right.
Yeah, World War I is when it cuts off. The third generation is the most numerous. The number of Jews in Israel, in Palestine, sorry, will reach about 400,000. It's about a third of the population of Palestine. So even then, if we just say you're a free and independent state, the numbers do not favor. But the numbers are significant enough to make the call for an independent Jewish state viable. And that's what makes it important. 400,000, if they're a third of it, that means that the state is about 1.2 million. That's enough to have political muscle to make demands. Even if it's not the majority there. Okay. Immigration is going to, when we talk about the Hebron massacre or later 1936, the Arab revolts, almost, I don't want to say almost exclusively, but the central trigger to those events are Arab anger over immigration. What is going on in the interwar years is the British are a mess. The British will have a series of white papers. The first white paper will say, we're going to allow an increase of Jewish immigration, and we're going to do things to protect them as they build their way to whatever they're going to build. The Arabs get pissed off. And the British are torn between how do we placate the Arabs? How do we placate the Jews? How do we run this system? So then they send out a second white paper, and that white paper says, we're going to restrict the number of Jewish immigrants, and we're going to support Arab concerns about Jewish land purchases and rate of immigration. Now the Jews are upset. And so we get another white paper, and they reverse themselves again. It is this back and forth, which is how the British ran the mandate of Palestine. Again, I'm giving you very, very short shrift on it, but it is impossible to know what the truth is about what really British intentions are.
Excuse me, what was the dates of the third Aliyah?
The third Aliyah is basically the interwar years,
So 1918 to 39.
right?
And what was the first Aliyah?
For 1880 to 1900.
Okay, thank you.
At any rate, and again, I know I'm rushing through this because there's limited time here. Then World War II comes up. Advantage, the Arabs. Why? We need Jewish support and we need Arab support. We're fighting Nazism with all the things that they're doing to Jews. The Jews don't have a choice. If you're picking a side, you're not going to side with the Nazis. They're on our side, and we don't have to make a deal to get them on our side. The Arabs.
Who's the we you're talking?
I'm talking about the Allied forces,
Okay.
the British, essentially. It's the British who are doing the negotiating.
Mhm.
But why are the British allowed to do it? What gives them the right to come in and do all of this and write the white papers and all?
Let's go back
It's a
to
good question.
before World War One. The Ottoman Empire is a dying empire.
Okay.
That's why Palestine's going to become available. That's why Syria and Jordan.
Okay.
The Ottoman Empire ruled those areas for centuries.
Mhm.
And it's called the dying old man of Europe, and World War One kills it. The empire collapses.
Okay.
Now these former, and they're not colonies, whatever you call them now, areas controlled by the Ottoman Empire are free. And they, as they are negotiating with the British for helping them in World War One fight the Ottomans, they say, what we want is our independence when this is over. And the British say, yes, you'll get it. They don't get it. What happens is we don't have the UN, and it's the League of Nations. Through the League of Nations, they set up a series of mandates. And mandates are different from colonies in that their stated purpose is we will run and supervise these areas until they're capable of governing themselves. And then the Sykes-Picot Commission went in to determine how to divide it. So the British are going to get Palestine, the French are going to get Syria and Jordan, and they divide it up with the League of Nations imprimatur.
Okay.
Yeah. Now I in going so short shrift, I did jump over that. I'm glad you brought that up. Do you have something you wanted to
Yeah,
say?
you said it backwards. It was
Did I?
Lebanon, Syria was French,
Yes.
and they called the whole thing Transjordan, but Jordan and Palestine was squished together into
Yes.
one,
Yes.
which probably led to more problems.
Yes, it did. And you could go into the history of Africa colonialism, and the same thing that will happen. And this affects the world after independence is achieved. If you see the British behaving in Nigeria or the French in Nigeria, yes. At any rate, what they will do is they will favor a certain tribe over another tribe. And when they leave, they put that tribe in positions of power, which puts them in a kind of a civil war situation with the other tribes. And I mean, one of the months we're going to do about the establishment of the nation of Iraq, they put 3 groups in there who hated each other, but they drew lines in a map and said, you're a country.
But
And
do they willingly and knowingly do that though? I mean,
I think it was done for,
because that's me
Yes.
coming in somewhere and saying, well, Lansdowne and East Lansdowne and this other town don't really get along, but I'm gonna put them all together.
and the key word here is economics.
Okay.
You're putting different resources together, and what you're doing as you're trying to leave, it's part of what the British Commonwealth is all about, is we're leaving, but can we have some economic relationships that continue
Okay,
after we
because we can
leave?
still
and
get our stuff.
Those resources here.
We will still want our stuff.
Iraq was the first place where oil in the Middle East was discovered. They want to keep their
We still want our
contact
stuff.
connection to Iraq.
Yeah.
That's important. Okay, I'm gonna really just close this off
Thank you.
and open it up to any.
I didn't mean
person
to-
say anything. No.
Push it that way. but-
I'm glad, I'm glad that people do. Then we are going to, finally get to World War II. And, Gary was saying earlier, there is a collective guilt in Europe as we, hear about the revelations of what was going on in the camps, etc. But again, not a favorite book of mine, but I know you like it, Gary, Exodus. It will tell the story of, post-war, the Jewish refugees were not being allowed by the British to come into Palestine. They were being collected and put into camps, guess where? In Cyprus and Germany. Because they were not, the British were about up to here with dealing with the Arab-Israeli fights over immigration. And they were trying
British
to,
or something, aren't they?
yeah. If unfortunately, if you listen to me long enough, you will hear me say a lot of things about the British.
I've always thought that the current conflicts or the conflicts over the last 40 years were really based on what the British did.
The British have so much responsibility
Yeah.
for what is going on in the Middle East to this day.
Yeah.
Absolutely. At any rate, that's going to bring us up to 1948, which we're not going to deal with. My whole point here today, again, was not to resolve any divisions over or even create a stronger understanding of what's going on in the world today, but more to get us to the beginning point and see if we can understand that, and then we'll take different pieces at a time. And as we do this these 2 years, it's not gonna be all Arab-Israeli stuff. Next month is the Suez Canal.
Yeah, I'm
The
interested.
Suez Canal
Yeah.
transforms
That's something.
world economies.
Yeah.
It is a phenomenally important, the amount of oil that flows through the Suez Canal to Europe. Europe could not survive if you shut down the Suez Canal. And here we get into colonialism again. The British and French
They were
are,
there.
they were
trying to build.
controlling it. They owned it. The Egyptians wanted to own it, but they did not. It was run by the British and the French. And we get into 1956 with the Suez Crisis. And again, so the point is with colonialism, the British were smarter about it than the French. The French got into a lot of long, bitter wars, Indochina War, which morphs into Vietnam. The British, when they realized that things were turning the way they were turning, tried to create Commonwealth relationships so that, all right, we'll leave, but we can still be friends. We can
Yeah.
still have economic relationships, and we can still have, I mean, one of the things we talked about last month in a lot of these, in the Ottoman Empire, the Europeans were there because of, were able to get very, very wealthy because of a system called capitulation. A capitulation said a European citizen, a British, they make it for each country. The British say, all right, we can come in here, but we don't have to obey your laws. And if we violate any law, we don't have to go through your courts. And we also get certain economic benefits in terms of regulations that we have to follow that your people don't have to follow. And so when we leave, what we want to say is, we're leaving, but can we keep those benefit
They were
structures in
brilliant, weren't
place?
they? Weren't they brilliant?
They were.
They were brilliant.
The brilliance of the British Empire was they mastered the Industrial Revolution and capitalism faster than anybody else.
Brilliant. You have to give it to them.
Yeah. At this point, I will shut up. If anybody has any comments that they want to make, they can make it, and if not, then we will.
Could I tell you what my son said?
Absolutely.
He's a computer person, but he knows, like, anytime I bring up anything to him, I don't know whether he really knows what he's talking about, but he puts on a good act. So, what I told him where I was going tonight, of course it's slow. Of course,
I'll tell you, knowing world history going all the way back, and that's what everybody's downfall is. We really don't know.
No.
We don't know. And so we see these things today. And they're the basis of a lot of other things, and we just don't.
Even if you get down to all the, I'll let you in a second, all the problems of famine and starvation in Africa are a result of colonial policies in Africa. It's not nature has been cruel. No,
Yeah.
it's
probably a combination,
Yes, of
Yeah.
course, but
because there's always been famines.
Okay, so my son says
okay.
you'll probably skip Herzl's Mauschel. I don't even know what that is. Mauschel.
We did skip it. I don't know what.
Um, Herzl was a secular nationalist, which is exactly what you're saying, but in a very anti-Semitic country, Austria. His quest for a Jewish state wasn't motivated by religious beliefs. And because of that, location was secondary to him. In addition to Palestine, he considered Argentina, Sinai, East Africa.
Yeah.
And then Baron Rothschild rejected Herzl's plans,
Twice.
understanding that they would endanger Jews in both the diaspora and Palestine, particularly his Rothschild's, I don't know if this is Hovevei Zion
Yes,
settlement.
he had created a settlement
Her,
in
Rothschild
Israel.
did,
in Palestine,
yeah,
and he thought if we start a mass immigration of Jews into Palestine, it'll create friction and it'll hurt the settlement that he has already funded.
Why was he opposed if he had made his own
He was-
settlement?
he
Why
was-
was he opposed to more?
I think what he was doing, he was simply helping. His idea was to help refugees who were being persecuted find a place of escape. It was not create a Jewish homeland.
Oh,
So that is the difference there.
Mhm.
And there's another man, Baron de Hirsch, who is on the level of a Rothschild, maybe not quite as rich, but up
Mhm,
there.
mhm.
And he was the one who was creating settlements and funding settlements in Argentina.
Now, why didn't they select Argentina now?
I think that, when we were talking about what are the connective tissues that tied Jews with the world, one of them was a pull towards Palestine.
Yeah,
a pull towards
I can see
Jerusalem.
that.
I mean, the
Yeah,
Jews
that
are
makes
always
sense.
there.
Yeah,
Jews
that
are
makes
always
sense.
there.
Yeah.
The,
If you
you
look
know,
up
the area, the region of the Bible, I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
biblical
that makes
history,
sense.
I mean, Jews were always there. It was always, I'm not saying other people were not there, but
Right. Yeah, Gary.
emotionally, they wanted
Yeah.
to be
if,
there.
if you there are actually two or three things I just want to say quickly. First of all, I want to apologize for misspeaking, throwing out Da Vinci when I did mean Michelangelo. But secondly, as far as ethnic description of ethnic groups, isn't it interesting that we have African Americans, but not Jewish Americans? We have American Jews. We have Russian Jews. The descriptive, the adjective and the noun, or rather I can't speak English.
I consider myself a Jewish American.
But that isn't strange to me. I mean, Africa's got what,
But
52, 54 countries? Which one are we gonna claim?
I'm not, no. What I'm pointing out is that those terms, like the term Russian Jew, these terms came about as a function of 19th century anti-Semitism. I mean, that's why Jews were always called. I appreciate you consider yourself. I largely consider myself to be a Jewish American, although making Aliyah is something I have toyed with for many years in my life.
I mean,
But
I don't know. I don't know growing up if I ever thought I really truly was an American. Your experience is different. I don't know if I ever really thought about that in a way that said I was truly an American. I don't even think that crossed my mind
Well,
because of where I lived, how I grew up, and how the Black community at that time tried to insulate itself.
Mhm.
So growing up, I was insulated from a lot of things
Sure.
until I went to an area that was integrated. But I was insulated from a lot of stuff. So I didn't start getting hit with all that stuff until I was like in what, 5th grade? So I never thought about this whole idea of being an American. It didn't cross my mind.
But I'm going to take this in a different direction
Mhm.
because one of the interesting things that I skipped over here, one of the things that tie people together, one is language. What you
true,
will
we
see
didn't have
here is these people who are coming to Palestine speak Russian, speak
Yeah.
Polish, speak all these different languages. Somewhat common among them was the use of Yiddish. But what you get is a movement to make Hebrew the language to tie all Jews together. And Hebrew was really at this point not a language that was spoken by Jews. Yiddish was. Hebrew was used in prayer, but not as a spoken language. But now it is a spoken language.
It's one of the most, I think, one of the most, I mean, not that I won't go into my allegiances here, but one of the most amazing things about the modern state of Israel is the rebirth of of an ancient language to make it modern. I mean, they decided we will, because we haven't talked much about the Arab Jews,
Right.
Jews from Northern Africa and, the peninsulas and those areas. But if we wanted to be one people with one language, it had to be Hebrew. It wasn't going to be Russian. It wasn't going to be Yiddish.
And I've always,
Yiddish excluded the Arab Jews. And they just decide this ancient language, they had to make up words for traffic light,
Right.
but at least
It's-
you had that, because I've always believed that one of the things that could have united the African American community in this country was a language. We didn't have one.
No,
And our skin color wasn't enough,
no.
because we have people who can pass for white and will pass, and we have people who can't. We have all throughout. But if we had a language, if we had a language like Italian, French, Jews.
There was a small experiment of that with Gullah Gullah language.
Yeah,
in
but
the
that wasn't
Carolinas. Yeah, that was.
But if we had
local.
had a language,
Remember, education too kind of played a role.
those people.
I went to, like, the university in the black community.
Yeah.
I grew up pretty much in a white community, in white schools, because I was on that line where they needed more minorities in a white, in a white school.
But if we had a language,
So, it's how, like you said, we didn't have a language.
if we had a language, things would have been entirely different. Because you
Yeah.
can't always unite over where you live. You can't always unite over your color, even though we have tried that. Because I think one of the things I think is most interesting about the Black community is that when people do pass, we don't give them up. We never gave them up. The only thing you would hear people say is, well, they might come back for their mother's funeral. We'll take it, we'll look around and see.
Right.
But if we don't, nobody gives them up. Nobody throws them underneath the bus. It's like, look, they were trying for a better life. Let them go. They made that decision.
But going back to one thing, it's amazing how Hebrew transformed all that time when it did never.
Yeah.
And then how it just, I just think
Language is
that,
important.
and you thought maybe that would unite and everything, but.
I think one of the things that interests me is I don't think ethnicity, especially if we're talking about Jews, because ethnicity is so diverse. So it can't be this thing that ties them together. Language is probably the most unifying force in the
Yes.
world.
Yes.
And they didn't have that, but they had degrees of it with Yiddish because a lot spoke Yiddish. But making Hebrew that language really did help to tie. And then I think it is, I believe in race memory, the idea that the history of what has happened to your group is somehow, even if you haven't read the books, you kind of know it or are shaped by it in some way. And that's not a scientific response. That's how a kind of idea that I have in my
No, I
head.
mean, I do believe we have that, but I've always believed if we had language, it would have been different.
Yes.
We just didn't have a common language.
One thing I would like to say about Hebrew, just to put this out there, although obviously there is a huge amount of it that overlaps, ancient Hebrew and modern Hebrew are not the same. They're vis-a-vis the comment about traffic lights. I mean, there are many words you're going to find in the Hebrew Bible that are never spoken, that are just not words on the street in Israel. And perhaps, forgive me for my comment about comparing the phrase African American with American Jew. Let's say Italian American or Polish American. I mean, the point is, we only with Jews are we considered to be monolithic in common speak.
Hmm.
Well,
Getting back to what Celeste said about Black American communities, that was a problem. Well, maybe But that was the situation in Europe, as I understand it, when the Jews would stay in their communities and not integrate and
Assimilate.
give up their culture, or in an effort to join
Right.
the existing culture. And of course, if they merged up, maybe the original culture would be the dominant one, but it would pick up elements of Judaism. But instead, they stayed in their areas, and obviously they must have interacted to some degree, because I think a lot of marriages, happen.
And we can't ignore the fact that there clearly were many Jews who successfully assimilated into Europe. And Theodor Herzl was among them. He was very successful as a German, as an Austrian.
What's so ironic, given what we know, what happened over the last 100 years, is that Germany was where most the Jews that were more integrated, more successful, more financially and education, all that, and in fact, I think Gary was talking about Reform Judaism, product of the 20th century. It actually was in the 19th century and grew out of Germany, because they were really integrated, the Jews, and they kind of the Jews adopted Christian religious traditions, organs and their places of worship and all that type of stuff. And so some of the first, before the big waves of Eastern European Jewish immigration in late 1800s and into the early 20th century, mid 19th century, the Jews that were coming here were successful. They were coming here for opportunity, not escaping. A lot of them were Germans,
Sure.
German Jews. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. The oldest synagogue in Buffalo, New York is a Reformed Jewish synagogue from the mid 1800s. And the irony, of course, is this is where the Jews were most integrated and most successful, and probably intermarriage and that type of thing was going on a lot. And then you got, the rise of fascism and Nazism.
But is it most immigrants coming initially, weren't they always the better ones? The people who were successful, the people who were.
A lot of it depends on having the resources to make the journey,
Because,
so that would be.
more people don't travel. I mean, I hate to say it that way,
No,
but the
but-
people who leave are usually the people.
But in desperation,
The turn of the century immigration, the Italians, the Poles, the Jews, I don't know why. But it was different because they were poor. I mean, the Italians were some of the poorest immigrants. I don't know really the immigration rules and laws at that time, why they were so welcomed. And I think by the 1920s or so, it was kind of shut down.
yeah. Well, I'm gonna have to close this off. This has
Really
been
interesting.
really good, and everybody's contributions are much appreciated.
It's fun, thank
All
you,
right,
thank you.
thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
All right,
The
here we go.
Alice.